Further today, in our Earth Matters series, the Trump administration is considering withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, or at least weakening the U.S. commitment to reducing about a quarter of the U.S. carbon emissions by the year 2025. The Paris Climate Agreement is the world's first comprehensive climate agreement. It was adopted in 2015 by nearly 200 nations. Sources tell CNN that a decision by President Trump could come as early as next week. Here with me to talk about it more is Todd Stern. He was the lead U.S. negotiator for the Paris Agreement under former President Obama. Todd, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Jake.
What would it mean if the U.S. were to pull out entirely from the agreement?
It would be a huge big deal. I mean, it would fundamentally undermine the international regime. First of all, you can't solve climate change without an international regime because it's a quintessentially global problem. You can't just.
When you say international regime, you mean by the international community?
Yes. So Paris is an agreement that was entered into by 195 nations who all had to agree, who have been working on this for years and years and years, and it happened with enormous U.S. leadership, right?
Yeah.
So you have great investment. But you can't get the problem solved without that kind of international cooperation, and if the U.S. is not part of it, you're not going to. The U.S. is essentially an indispensable nation. You got to have the U.S. in order for this agreement to really work, and it would also have an enormous impact on the U.S. itself.
And if the U.S. were to weaken the commitment, not pull out entirely, but just say we're not going to meet that standard, or we're not going to try to meet that standard by 2025, what would that mean?
I think that would be very unfortunate. It would be a bad signal. It would be a bad example to others. But it's a lot better than pulling out of the agreement altogether. So I don't condone that at all, but as between the two, it's absolutely better to stay in the agreement. And look, the pulling out would cause enormous damage to the standing of the United States in the world. You have enormous investment by countries all over the world. The U.S. pulling out would be a kind of slap in the face, and it's a kind of to hell with you with respect to an issue that countries have been enormously concerned about, rightly concerned about. And if you then think you're going to turn around and seek cooperation of other countries on all sorts of other issues, it's not going to happen.
Do you think it will undermine the ability of President Trump to do diplomacy on North Korea, on Iran, on anything else?
I think on all sorts of issues, whether it's going to affect North Korea or Iran or this one or that one in particular. I think it depends. But you will see U.S. credibility and leverage in the international community absolutely reduced because this is an issue that people care about, and that they know they cannot solve without U.S. engagement. So for the U.S. to suddenly say, you know, we really don't care about your concerns, and we're going to look the other way, and we're going to walk away from everything that we've just done, would be very, very damaging.
In terms of President Trump, what would you, he has said that he thinks climate change is a Chinese hoax. He obviously does not take it seriously at all. There are people in the administration, such as Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and others, who take it more seriously and don't want him to withdraw. How is the environmental community, how are people like you trying to convince him not to pull out of this or not to weaken it?
Well, look, you know, you don't just need to look at the environmental community, right? I mean, you look at the Pentagon, you look at the intelligence community, you look at the business community. There's overwhelming support in the business community for the United States to stay in, and for good reason. They look at climate change. They actually know it's real. It's not an ideological issue for them. This is a dollars and cents issue. They know that Paris was a good deal, an historic deal, and that's balanced. They want the United States in this deal because if they're not in this deal, the business interests of the U.S. won't be protected. There's all kinds of issues that arise in these discussions, and they will be ongoing discussions to further implement Paris. But issues like intellectual property, issues like trade, the U.S. Business community won't be protected if the United States is not there, and they know it. And business likes predictability. And in, out is not what business wants.
All right.
So business is also fully supportive of staying in.
Todd Stern, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.